A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If you're able to hear me out perfectly well, kindly confirm the same. Thank you very much. So, hello, a very warm good evening to all of you, and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the Thursday webinar, which is going to be the mains oriented webinar, where we shall be covering various different topics which are relevant for the current affairs, which have been mentioned in the current affairs for the past month, from the portion of environment ecology, science and tech, as well as we shall be covering the areas and topics which have been mentioned in the magazine of Kurukshetra. So, these are the various different areas where those portions which are relevant, which have been found to be present in current affairs, but are also relevant for your mains examination. That is something that we are going to hold the discussion for. Now, meanwhile, our prelims test series is going, and that is where all of you, regardless of the stage and the level of preparation that you are in, you can always take a test and you can judge your level of preparedness. You can come across newer sources of information here as well, and always you can polish the existing preparation that you have. Having said that, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to hold the discussion for today. So today, we are going to hold a discussion for 6 various topics which have been mentioned in the news. We are going to dig deeper into each of these topics. We are going to understand the aspects of these topics. And in general, in the PPT itself, we have made the PPT slightly, in a way, the text prominent PPT, so to say, where you will find enough amount of textual portion in that. And that would serve as your purpose of revision, even when you decide and if you decide to revise these areas at the time of examination, you can rely on the PPT itself for these topics. So the first topic that we are going to discuss today is going to be heat waves. Now, these heat waves, when we discuss, what are these? What are the criteria when we declare a heat wave? And is the criteria same throughout the country, or is the criteria slightly different when we consider the hill region and the plain areas? Why is it that India experiences heat waves? And already in the present scenario, whichever part of the country you are from, you would be experiencing extraordinarily high temperatures. So that again is a part of the heat wave. So what are the reasons why India experiences heat waves? We are going to take a look into that. Then India's solar push augurs a looming waste challenge. While significant of you would be aware that we are expanding at quite a significant rate in terms of solar energy, addition of newer capacity in terms of solar energy. So here, when you use that solar energy or when you want to extract that solar energy, basically you make use of what? Solar panels. Eventually, all these solar panels, it is not as if they are immortal, that they can be used for hundreds and thousands of years. They reach the end of their shelf life where they need to be replaced. But what happens to the older solar panels? There is no significant use out of it, and that is where the e-waste is getting accumulated. So this is again something that we are going to discuss about. Then India to estimate TB burden, the tuberculosis burden, using its own system. Now here we will be discussing about the fact that India has got the largest number of individual TB cases across the world. And recently, on the occasion of World TB Day, which is celebrated on 24th of March, now in Varanasi, you had the Prime Minister inaugurating the One World TB Summit, and that is where India reaffirmed its commitment to do away with TB cases by 2025. So here we shall be analyzing the burden of TB. What are the various challenges which are faced by the government? Why is it that despite after so many years of independence, still we are saddled with this kind of a disease? And not only saddled with it, we have the absolute largest number of people who are affected by it. What are the governmental initiatives in the process? That is again something we are going to look into. Then the Great Nicobar Island project, a 72,000 crore project for various different developmental activities, including a port, including an airfield and an airport, a township. All of that has been put on hold by NGT, that is the National Green Tribunal, and the environmental clearances provided to that project, that has been questioned as well. So here we will analyze this particular project as well. Then these are the two topics which are from the portion of Kurukshetra. Now, Yojana and Kurukshetra, they are very important magazines for your overall preparation in the mains examination, which is helpful in the general studies portion as well as in the portion of essay, as well as to gain an overall perspective about what are the issues that the country faces. Now, in Kurukshetra, I hope I don't need to tell you guys, but those of us who are unaware of it, Kurukshetra is a monthly magazine which is based on rural development. Okay, this is something that is based on rural developmental aspects, development issues. So here you will come across various different topics on a monthly basis, dealing with the aspect of development, dealing with other such aspects. So that is where Kurukshetra becomes important for study as well. Now here two of the topics from Kurukshetra: boosting agriculture and rural development, as well as development of tourism sector. That is something we are going to take a look into, and the entire cyclical process, that why rural development is relevant when we talk about the tourism sector, what are the challenges which are faced. And as has been the case in the webinars, for all of these topics, we shall also encounter a mains type question which can be framed from there, and we can try to have an analysis of how to answer those questions, so that in whatever stage of preparation you are in, you can initiate the portion of writing and you can inculcate the writing skill needed, because that is what is very important if you want to succeed in this examination overall. So without further ado, let us initiate the discussion. Meanwhile, after each of the topic, I will try to answer few of your questions. But again, most of the questions I shall be taking up at the end of the discussion, and the questions shall be answered by the subject matter experts, the very qualified subject matter experts. So have patience when you put up your questions, and your questions will be catered to. Now here, we start with the heat waves. Now, when we talk about heat waves, now what are these? These are extraordinarily hot and warm conditions which are prevalent in a particular area for a prolonged duration. That is what is a heat wave. When we say wave, wave is something which overwhelms. And that is where, when we talk about heat waves, you have an overwhelming proportion of hotter characteristics and hotter weather conditions which are prevalent over a region. Now, why is that the heat waves are in news presently? They are in news because recently, at a government function which was held in Mumbai, a kind of an award giving ceremony which was conducted in Mumbai, you had many people who died out of heat stroke. This is the public event that we are talking about. Many people died out of heat stroke due to overexposure to very hotter conditions. Presently in our country, for the past month and more, everyone, or in fact majority of the regions, they are suffering from very high temperatures. So whenever we have very high temperatures, can we straight away declare that as a heat wave? No. Only if you have the temperature, if you consider the absolute temperature, if the absolute temperature is greater than 45 degrees Celsius, only in those conditions can you directly declare a heat wave. Otherwise, you have necessary criteria which needs to be fulfilled for a region to be declared as a region suffering from heat wave. In India, generally from the month of March and April onwards, all the way till May, and in some portions even up till June, the Indian territory and the Indian landmass experiences very higher temperature. So overall, that is something which is attributed to the impact of global warming and the overall climate change, which is impacting us. We do know that due to climate change and global warming, anyways, the amount of rainfall which is received by the country, the amount of rainfall is not only getting distributed and disturbed, it is also leading to a larger dry spell area. What do I mean by that? So let's suppose earlier you had a situation, and this is what reflects the changing climatic conditions. Let's suppose earlier you had a situation that during 1 month, let's say, you would receive 10 centimeter of rain in 1 month. Now, this rain ideally would be distributed, that let's say every 3 days you receive 1 centimeter of rain. Okay, so in that case, if you have every three days, every third day, 1 to 2 centimeter of rains. Now, this would provide significant amount of moderation to the temperature. Because in your own place, if you would associate with your memory, your experience, you would have known about it that when you experience rainfall, let's say every 2 to 3 days, the temperature doesn't become very oppressive. It is slightly cooler. But then due to climate change and also due to increased amount of deforestation that we have carried out, because urbanization is increasing, the number of people coming to urban areas, that is increasing. So the urban space is also increasing. That means deforestation is carried out. Now, in order to carry out deforestation, you are clearing the land, which had the presence of trees earlier. Now, due to that, now we have concentrated spells of rain. Now, we have concentrated spells of rain. Spell. Which means what? Let's say every 10 days or every 12th, 15th day, you will have 5 centimeter of rain in 1 day. Let's suppose. Now, this much amount of rainfall, when it is received in 1 day, obviously, no particular landmass will have the capacity to absorb or soak in that much amount of rainfall in a natural environment. So that is why you would have observed in your city, in your locality, when it rains very heavily. And thereby it leads to causation of floods, and the urban landscape also gets damaged, where the garbage keeps floating on the roads, and you have a lot of nuisance, lot of pollution created thereby as well. So that is the situation. Excess rainfall happening in 1 day, that means what? The rest of the month is dry. Rest of the month is dry. When the rest of the month is dry, obviously every day heating will happen, heating will be carried on, and you will have the temperatures rocketing significantly upwards. Now, one of the question which was asked by Dinkar, you had asked the question that what is absolute temperature? So here, when I say absolute temperature, please understand that this is a kind of a categorization which is done when the temperature is above 45 degrees Celsius in any place, then directly that place is inferred as a region suffering from heat wave. Otherwise, you will take a look at the criteria which needs to be mentioned, where in the plain regions, the temperature has to exceed 40 degrees Celsius. It has to be 5 degrees Celsius higher than the average maximum temperature which is observed. Then you declare an area as a heat wave. Right? So, lot of criteria needs to be fulfilled. However, if the temperature, the maximum temperature in a region exceeds 45 degrees Celsius, it is a heat wave. Okay? Now, let me ask you a question. How many of us are aware of maximum, the fundamental of maximum temperature and minimum temperature? When we talk about maximum temperature, so whichever place you are living in, that place will have its own maximum temperature measured on a daily basis and also a minimum temperature. So when is it measured? At what time do you think maximum temperature is measured? Let me know. 2 p.m. Okay. 3 p.m. Good. Very good. So when we talk about maximum temperature, no, it is not 12. Maximum temperature is measured generally between 2 to 3 p.m. Sometimes it is also 3 p.m., 3:30 p.m. That is when, for the entirety of the day, heating has been received. That is when maximum temperature is measured. Generally, you will experience this to be measured between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay? Then minimum temperature is measured when? Very good. Mohammed Shekhar Shovik also. Very good. Vishakha. So this is observed in between roughly, generally around 5 a.m. in the morning. So roughly between 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. That is when the earth surface has lost tremendous amount of heat, and that is what has provided with the level of cooling. That is when the minimum temperature is observed. So when measuring the conditions and criteria to be fulfilled for a heat wave, this maximum temperature is taken a note of, because in general, on an average, whichever, let's say you have been living in the region of Delhi. Now, Delhi has got its own climatic records of the past as well, where, let's say, on 28th of March, 27th of April, 28th of April, 29th of April, what is the temperature conditions which are observed previously, that has also been recorded. So if the current temperature, maximum temperature, significantly exceeds the climatic records, obviously it is a point of concern. And that is when a heat wave is declared in that region. So here, over 60% of India, or 22 states and union territories, recorded above normal maximum temperatures as on 18th of April. And that is where in India, overall, if you observe that, we might think that what is the problem with heat waves? Why is it that we are discussing it? Look at the level of disaster. 5,541 people lost their lives in the decade between 2013 to 2022 due to heat wave conditions. So when you have so many people, that means close to around 550 people every year, they lose their lives due to heat wave conditions. However, if you compare it to the previous decade, the number of deaths were lesser. It has increased. Means what? Not only are the characteristics of climate and weather turning out to be more hostile and more frequent, that also means that the government needs to, and the administration needs to, provide the relevant solution. In many of the cities and municipalities, you will observe that it is the administrative officials, the bureaucrats. When you become IAS officers, you will also be given this task. So the bureaucrats, they bring in various policies to help people during the conditions of extraordinarily higher temperature. However, the number of deaths have decreased since 2020 because various standard operating procedures have been followed. Overall, as per the bulletin released by Indian Meteorological Department, which depicts the temperature of 18th of April 2023, you would observe that majority of the country is experiencing very high temperatures. At one point of time, not long back in the past, April was considered to be a condition or a month of moderate temperature. May was considered to be very hot, but April was always considered to have a very moderate temperature. Look at the conditions that we have now. So that is what is very worrying. So what are the criteria? What is the criteria for a heat wave being declared or a region being declared as suffering from heat wave? Let us take a look at that. So first of all, heat wave is declared by which organization? It is the Indian Meteorological Department, or IMD, which declares the conditions of heat wave. Now here, what is the condition? if the temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius over plains and above 30 degrees in hills and around 4.5 degrees above normal. Normal of what? Normal of the expected temperature. When we say here normal, normal refers to the expected temperature. Okay. So it has to be higher by 4.5 degrees Celsius. And when the temperature is 6.5 degrees Celsius above normal, that is when you declare a severe heat wave. Okay, so that is when significantly larger precautions are carried out. For example, providing various shades in the pathway across the cities and urban spaces, and also providing with water facilities, drinking water facilities in the nearby location. When actual maximum temperature remains 45 degrees Celsius or more, irrespective of the normal conditions, 45 degrees Celsius and above is always cited or regarded as a heat wave condition. They generally occur in the periods from March to June in central and northwestern India and the coastal areas of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. Now, in Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, you don't have so frequent heat waves occurring. What do you think is the reason? That the heat waves in north and northwestern India, they are so very oppressive and so very prolonged and frequent, but that is not observed in the regions of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. What do you think would be the reason? Very good. So you have the presence of a coastline. Presence of a coastline means you have frequent incurrences or frequent occurrences of land breeze and sea breeze as well. Now, when you have land and sea breeze, which is consistently in motion, please understand that will always bring about a kind of a cooling effect. Always, when you have wind movement, winds, they will bring about a cooling effect. Why is that? Because whenever you have wind, they will carry away the moisture, right? Whatever is present in the air, that will be carried away. That means there will be significantly higher amount of evaporation which will happen. And evaporation, wherever it happens, let's say we start sweating and we start perspiring and it gets evaporated, if that is also carried away by the wind, then your skin becomes, or you experience slight a cooling effect thereby. So evaporation always brings about a cooling effect, and winds, they accelerate evaporation. Always accelerate evaporation. That is why coastal areas, they don't suffer from heat waves. Now let us take a look at the reasons why we suffer from heat waves during these conditions. After all, even last year, that is in the year 2022, that is also when India suffered from very devastating heat waves. And if you recall, that is the reason why in India, the wheat crop which was generated or which is harvested in the month of March and April, the overall wheat harvest was impacted, and the output of wheat harvest, that reduced due to the heat waves. Even though wheat as a crop requires drier condition, sunny condition at the time of harvesting, but still due to the heat waves, India experienced lower output, due to which, if you remember, India had to put an export ban on wheat, despite being the second largest producer of wheat across the world, despite being the only other alternative for provision of wheat in the world, other than Ukraine, which is already stuck in war. India still could not export as humongous quantities as it would have desired because of the heat wave conditions. We are suffering from heat wave conditions again this year, which might have an adverse impact on the wheat output in general. Okay. Now, what are the reasons? One of the reasons is that in the month of February and March, where you would normally receive some amount of moderating rainfall in 3 to 4 days, etc., and that is generally a part of the western disturbances. Now, in the few years that have passed on, or in the recent past, as you can say, these months have not received that much amount of rainfall. And that is because the western disturbance in general, that is weakening, right? So as you can see, western disturbance in itself is getting disturbed. Its impact is getting weakened. Now, why is it getting weakened? First of all, this western disturbance, for all of us who are not aware about it, this western disturbance starts bringing amount of moisture and rainfall in our country right from the month of November all the way till April. That is the northern, northwestern, and the northern plains of the country. They receive rainfall during these months due to western disturbances. In whichever part of the northern part of the country you are in, if you have received rainfall in the past month and a half, you have received rainfall because of western disturbances. So they carry moisture all the way from the region of Mediterranean and they bring it over to India. And when these winds carrying moisture, they come over to India, they hit the Himalayas, they cannot move any further. And that is when they cause rainfall in the region of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, New Delhi, all the way sometimes even up till Assam plains and also Rajasthan. Whereas in the case of the Himalayan foothills, they will bring precipitation in the form of snowfall. That is why you would also have read about news stories where simultaneously you would have come across the news story that there has been significant amount of snowfall in Jammu Kashmir and Himachal, whereas the region of Rajasthan, New Delhi, Haryana, they are also always experiencing very high temperatures. So this is again a work of western disturbance. Now this western disturbance in itself is becoming irregular. Meaning what? Meaning the amount of frequent rainfalls which were brought, that has reduced. Meaning what? Meaning that the temperatures, they spike up significantly without any moderation right from the month of end February. And that means by the time that you are in the mid of March, the temperatures have started becoming oppressively hot. Then there is another factor. Another factor, if you think about it, that is high pressure condition created and aided by jet streams. Now, I hope we are aware that jet streams, they are very high altitude winds, very fast moving winds in general. And over the country, you have the presence of a kind of a jet stream, that is the subtropical westerly jet stream. Subtropical westerly jet stream moves over the central and the northern parts of the country, and this is what also delays the monsoonal rainfall. When you study about the mechanism and onset of monsoon, you would be aware of this as well. So this is a kind of a jet stream. Now these jet streams, they are basically moving at a higher altitude over the central part of the country. So if you think about it, that this is the landmass, here you have the movement of very fast moving winds, very fast moving winds. Now these winds, they block the rise of air. Okay, they don't allow the air from different regions to mix. They block the rise of air. Ideally, what happens when you have very low, very high temperature conditions? Ideally, the air over the land will get heated up. The air starts to rise up. Because it gets heated up, it becomes lighter, it rises up. Beyond a height, if it rises up, it starts to condense, because higher up away from the ground that you go, the temperature tends to reduce. Obviously, it becomes cooler as you go higher up. So whenever under normal circumstances the land gets very hot, air above it also becomes hot. It rises up. Eventually, after it rises up, it becomes very cold. It undergoes condensation, and it will provide some amount of convectional rainfall, providing you much needed relief. But if in the higher region, let's suppose you have the presence of that jet stream, now that jet stream, it will not allow the air to rise up. That jet stream will act like a blocker or a blockage. So whatever is rising up, it will then be reflected back. So this warmer air is reflected back and further heats up the ground surface. Earlier, this jet stream would be very prominently present in the earlier months, and then by the month of April onwards, it would already start weakening. But now you find that this jet stream is more prominent even during the month of April and May because of warmer temperatures due to climate change. This jet stream is much more prominent for a longer duration, due to which you have the significant amount of reheating. So the warmer air tends to prevail in a region for a very long duration, providing these oppressive conditions. You have other factors as well. Climate change, which brings about longer dry spell, what we have talked about, and that has brought about the drying of the soil condition as well. The soil is becoming much more drier in turn, right? When the soil is becoming very dry, obviously there won't be any evaporation. If there is no evaporation, means no cooling. So this exaggerates the heating. The heating. All of us who are not aware about jet streams, western disturbances, etc., don't get perturbed by it. Think about it. You will study all of this in further detail. Just understand what are the factors which relate to heat wave. That is why I'm taking a longer period of time in order to help you understand that. Understand the basic concept that if the air movement is blocked, it will be reflected back, and that will provide an accelerated heating. This portion that we have talked about of creation of that heat and reflection of air creating that kind of a heat conditions, this is also the reason why the region of Canada, the region of Europe, the region of Siberia, they have been experiencing extraordinarily high temperatures for the past couple of years. You will come across the news stories for the past couple of years that Canada has experienced temperature of 45, 47 degrees Celsius. Europe has been experiencing that high temperature, due to which various things have started in a way dissociating themselves. A lot of biodiversity has died. It is because of this reason. Okay. Then you have the aspect of deforestation, due to which you don't have a regular rainfall, but rather you have concentrated spells of rain. Concentrated spell of rain followed by dry, longer dry period. Okay. That is what is the impact of deforestation. Then you have the impact of El Nino. Now, for the past 3 years, India had been experiencing the conditions of La Nina. La Nina is generally associated with higher than average amount of rainfall received during the monsoonal months. So in La Nina year, we experience slightly higher than average amount of rainfall. That is why last year you would have observed even the rice crop was destroyed, and significant loss of rice crop happened because of excessive rainfall in the month of July. That was caused by La Nina. This year and the next year, it is predicted to be an El Nino year. El Nino is also what is referred to as the warming phase of Pacific. Warming of Pacific. And when you have the warming of Pacific, it has got an adverse impact in terms of amount of rainfall received in India, where in India, we end up receiving lesser than average rainfall. Average rains. So when you already have lesser than average rains which are predicted for the year, this is supposed or estimated to get more severe during the months of June, July. Now we all are studying the portion of current affairs. From now on, I'm sure you will be following the portion of current affairs regardless of whether this is your first class, last class, whatever. Now observe the trend of rainfall. You would observe that the month of June, There in the initial portion, you might receive some rainfall, but the later part of June, July, and August, it is estimated that this year we are going to receive lesser rainfall. Observe this, and then you will be able to interrelate it if India has lesser rice productivity because of that. That will help you understand and cement this concept much better. Then you have the urban heat island effect as well. What is an urban heat island effect? That is when, due to increased amount of urban structures, concrete buildings, concrete roads and pavements that you have increased amount of heat which is absorbed by the urban areas. That is why in the urban areas, if you compare it to the nearby rural scenario and the rural landscape, always in urban areas you will come across a temperature which is higher than normal. So because of increased urbanization, we have higher amount of heat absorbed. Why? That is because in urban areas, you have black tarred roads, concrete buildings. Now, in general, during the afternoon, step outside your house, touch the concrete pavement or the outside of your building, and touch the soil. You will always find the soil to be cooler, whereas these concrete places, they will be much hotter. So when we say of an urban landscape, that entire landscape is constructed and comprised of concrete. So that is why overall the temperature will be higher. And with increasing amount of people migrating to urban areas, this problem always gets exaggerated. The impact of these heat waves, even though they are manifold, we are going to take a look into few of them. So obviously the direct impact which causes deaths is heat strokes and a health impact, where immediately you will find people, they suffer from dehydration. And if a prolonged exposure to heat happens, generally during the loo conditions in the northern part of the country, that is when the body temperature starts going up. It reaches around 104 degree Fahrenheit, etc. And that is when it becomes very dangerous. So that is when it can cause direct deaths. Then droughts and crop failures, with longer amount of dry spells which prevail. That means the soil does not get enough moisture. That means crop failure. Example can be given. In this case, example can be cited of wheat failure during 2022. Okay. Then energy security. What do we mean by energy security? So when you feel very hot, what is it that you do? You will switch on your fan. Or if, let's say, you have gone to a hotel, restaurant, or a public space where you don't have to care about your electricity bill, immediately you will order someone to switch on the air condition as well, right? So this will utilize a lot of energy. Now, utilizing that much amount of energy means we have a limited capacity of energy generation, means some or the other area that will experience load shedding, energy failure in general. In whichever city you are living in, you would be experiencing power cuts, frequent power cuts. Now, when we talk about the rich population and the richer section of the population, they will always have an alternative. They can have 5 generators installed in their house and they will never have to step out in the heat. But it is the poorer section which gets impacted by this. Energy security is at risk during very hot conditions because we have a limited capacity to generate and lot of consumption of electricity which happens. And when we are embarking upon our journey to have electrification for all, this is a major challenge that we are facing, along with water scarcity. The groundwater level is getting depleted at an extraordinary rate. So we have increased water scarcity as well. We have an impact on biodiversity as well. Many of the plants as well as the animals, they are impacted by the lack of drinking water. And not in the case of plants, they need water in the form of soil moisture. In the case of animals, when you visit any national park, any wildlife sanctuary, if you happen to visit as a tourist, you will observe that you have small watering holes or small areas where water is accumulated for the animals to quench their thirst. During the dry seasons, all of them, they dry up. That is where the animals, they are pushed to migrate or move through larger distances, bringing them in conflict with humans, oftentimes impacting them adversely. So you have an impact on biodiversity as well. You have an impact on land degradation as well. Why? Because extremely drier soil means nothing will be able to grow there. And a dry soil which doesn't have a vegetation on top of it, that is prone to being eroded. And when the topsoil is eroded, then you don't have anything left in that to support biodiversity in the future. So that is where heat waves are also causing prolonged land degradation. So here, lack of plant growth, which means topsoil is exposed, which means soil erosion, which means eventually land is degraded, means it is unable to support biodiversity anymore. Okay, so that is something you need to be aware of. So the question which can be framed and is frequently framed by UPSC in the mains examination: discuss the causes of more frequent heat waves occurring across the country, along with the impact across the various regions of the country. So in the introduction part, when we talk about intro, so in introduction, you have to talk about what is heat wave. Okay, what is a heat wave? You have to describe about that in the portion of introduction. The portion which we have written in the PPT, that in itself you can write. What are the criteria for a declaration of a heat wave? That's it. Then in the body, you can start with regions impacted. When we talk about the regions impacted, after that, you can talk about the causes which lead to that heat wave condition. Okay, and then eventually, because it is only for 150 words, otherwise you would have to write about the impact as well. So here in conclusion, just write about the fact that with the global warming and climate change upon us, we need to take immediate measures at the local level, at the administrative level, in order to cope up with the issue of frequent occurring heat waves, in order to make the conditions more conducive and survivable for our citizens. We could inculcate the solutions such as water harvesting, rainwater harvesting structures, tankages, etc. So all that you can write. Conclusion should be brief. It should always be a kind of a positive and constructive conclusion that you have to write. You should not write, now the situation is going to be so bad, nobody is going to survive, the situation is so extreme that you don't know what will happen. Such kind of a pessimistic note or tone should never be taken in conclusion. Okay? Right? So I hope this portion is clear. Okay, a few questions we will take. What is the effect of mild storms coming in the winter season, in the summer season? That provides a kind of a moderation in temperature, but most of the storms that you see nowadays, this is a kind of a convectional storm that you have. Due to heating of that region, you have creation of a low pressure. So in that immediate vicinity, it will provide some relief, but in the other areas, not much relief to be provided. Stephen, please give summary of every topic. Okay, fair enough. But I hope, Stephen, this was not a very complicated topic to have a summary of. You will have the recordings and the PPTs available with you anyways. Abhishek, due to La Nina, previous year my kharif crop failed due to excessive rainfall. This year El Nino will occur, Abhishek. So better take preventive measures. What is jet stream, Shubham? Jet stream is basically when we talk about very high altitude, in a way between 6 to 15 kilometers, that height, it varies. So you have very strong winds which move. And that is created because of difference in temperature in the upper atmosphere. When you have difference in temperature in between two regions in the upper atmosphere, that creates a difference in pressure in that localized region, and you have very strong winds which are in movement. You have four permanent jet streams which are in movement across the entirety of the planet. Can heat wave affect the economic activity as well? Absolutely yes, Sonia, because it leads to crop failures. Crop failures means a failure in rural economy. And when rural economy fails, means the rural demand is less. And that means the urban manufacturing will reduce. That means there will be unemployment and job loss in urban economy, and entire economic loss happens. Should we write criteria of heat waves in introduction of answer? You can. Or in the first portion of your body. Why Western disturbances are getting weakened? Western disturbances getting weakened because of the slower interaction between cold and warmer winds, because now due to heat or global warming, you also have warmer air coming from temperate areas. Now when the warmer air comes from temperate areas, so that difference in temperature which is required for an extra tropical thunderstorm to develop, that is absent. And it is not that the entire Western disturbance is weakening, it is that it is becoming very infrequent, due to which the regular moderation which needed to be provided, that is absent. After all, you would have experienced in the early part of April, in the first week of April and last week of March, you would have experienced many portions in northern part of the country, they also received hailstorm, where you have large ice cubes which start falling. Okay, right? Ways to reduce the impact of heat wave. You have various ways for Villapil, for example, you provide for more greener areas in the urban environment, you create natural spaces, you ensure that in the urban areas the pollution is lessened. Also, you ensure a standard operating procedure for the various hospitals to be able to tackle with the people who suffer from that. You need to have an adequate reporting by the police stations. Also, the people who are doing the rounds, they should be taking a look at the people being exposed to heat at regular intervals in the urban land spaces. You need to provide a shade, a place to take shelter in from the oppressive sun, and also regular and clean drinking water facilities at regular intervals so that people can hydrate themselves. Many of the municipal corporation commissioners, the IAS officers have been able to inculcate that. That is why you would have observed that since 2020 onwards, the number of deaths has reduced. Okay, can we continue now? El Nino and La Nina, Rudra, they are the heating and cooling phases of Pacific, which end up influencing the atmospheric circulation in India as well. You will study them under atmospheric phenomena of geography. So there you have a Walker circulation which is initiated, which influences the total amount of monsoonal rains received in India. Okay. IOD can mitigate rainfall deficit, which is induced by El Nino, and MJO has any impact on Indian monsoon? Yes, Kishan. When you have IOD conditions, positive IOD conditions, they can in a way neutralize the deficiency created by El Nino. But nonetheless, that is kind of hoping in the dark, that let's say I'm not prepared for the exam, I go there, that somehow the conditions will prevail which will help me mark the answers. That is like hoping in the dark. So we should not pin our hopes on natural phenomena again. Okay. Should I write suggestions for this 10 marker? No, you don't have scope to write suggestions here. And then we come to the second topic. India's solar push augurs a looming waste challenge. That is solar push, in the sense that due to our various climate commitments, etc. And India has also been a kind of a pioneer along with France to launch the International Solar Alliance, which has sought to increase the solar energy generated. Now, many of you, while we were discussing the heat waves, many of you were consistently writing the suggestion that can't we have more solar energy in order to mitigate the impact of energy security. While you can do that, but you have to understand that till now, the solar energy which is generated in the country, that is still not very high. That is still limited. That is why India is pushing at an aggressive rate for solarization across the various sectors, be it in the form of floating solar plants across water areas or large solar power plants which are constructed across Madhya Pradesh, across Rajasthan, and so on. So still we have lot to achieve and lot to conquer in this field. But here we have already started experiencing some of the drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? First of all, we have to be accepting of one fact. In India, the common population, the general population like you and I, we are not aware of what to do with the electronic waste, right? Let's say you are using this electronic pen. After it goes awry or after it is not functioning anymore, none of us are aware what to do with it. That is why in majority of our households, and you will confirm it, majority of our households, you will still find a scenario where the first mobile phone that you would have used, that is still kept somewhere in some corner. We don't know what to do with it. The older television sets, we don't know what to do with it. So same is the case with the solar panels as well. When you use increased number of solar panels, once these panels, they reach their shelf life, what to do with it? That is leading to a waste challenge. Only some amount of it is extracted, while the rest of it is allowed to lie on the land otherwise. Right? Now, look at the damaging impact. So, when, let's say, we have this land, on top of it, you have various different solar panels, which are simply bundled away as waste. Now, these solar panels will be exposed to heat. These solar panels will also be exposed to what? It will be exposed to rainfall also. So the heavy contaminants which are present, for example, you have cadmium, you have selenium, all the heavy contaminants, slowly and steadily, they will start leaching into the soil. They will start leaching into the soil. And that is when the soil will be contaminated with the heavy pollutants. Even after, let's say, you remove this pollutant, still the soil will be so contaminated, and will not be able to support any growth of plants in the future and cannot support plant growth. Now, obviously, if plant growth is not to be supported, no animals will also come in that area, and that area slowly and steadily will become barren. Soil erosion will happen, the topsoil will be removed. Now, furthermore, no plants will grow there. Eventually, it leads to land degradation. Okay. Now, increased push towards solar energy generates photovoltaic waste, because the solar panels, they are also referred to as photovoltaic cells, because with the availability of light, you are able to generate the voltage or potential difference or electricity in common lingo. So that is why photovoltaic. So photovoltaic waste is generated. It consists of hazardous materials including heavy metals such as cadmium, copper, lead, antimony, and selenium. All of these, ideally, you would like to see these only in the periodic table, not in the soil in general. So that is where it has got a harmful impact. Now, the problem here is that in our country, all the older solar panels, they are sold as scraps. They are not sold. You don't have a kind of a formal market where you can sell them, you will get a price, and the person who has bought it, they know how to recycle it. That is not present in the country. And why is it so? Because when we talk about the technology of solar panel, in India, majority of the solar panel assembly is done. Manufacturing is very limited. Manufacturing of all the products which comprise the solar panel, that is very, very limited. In majority of the cases, you come across what? That some material is imported from here, some material is imported from here. You assemble it in a plant and you disperse it. So the understanding of the material sciences, that is very limited. That is why you will find very few people who are aware of what to do with that waste. So when you sell it to your kabadi wala or your scraps, most of your waste, some part of it is melted and extracted. There also, proper guidelines are not followed. So the workers, they are exposed to very severe conditions of pollution. They are impacted by lung diseases and so on. And generally, otherwise, it is simply dumped out into the open. That God will take care of it. If not, then the government will take care of it. If not, then we will take in or choose some other government who will take care of it. We don't have an understanding of it. So here in India, mostly the solar panels which are used, just to give you an idea about the way in which the recycling is done and what are the materials that are polluted with. So basically, the photovoltaic modules, that is the solar panel, used in India are based on crystalline silicon technology. Now here, a crystalline silicon module, it consists of a glass sheet that you observe. That is what you observe in most of the solar panels, a glass sheet, an aluminium frame on the sides. This is the aluminium frame. This is the glass sheet that you have. An encapsulant, a back sheet, copper wires for doing the wiring interiorly, and silicon wafers. All these are small silicon wafers, right? All this is present in the typical crystalline silicon module that we have in India. Now, silver, tin, and lead, they are used to make these modules, crystalline silicon modules. A thin film module made of glass, encapsulant, and compound semiconductors, for example, germanium, silicon, etc. Now, what is the waste which is generated and why it is generated? Overall in our country, now this particular data pointer that you see, understand, data pointers will never be asked in the prelims. Data pointer, if you have to recall, that will always be to give you an advantage in the mains examination if you are able to sprinkle that data wherever needed. So wherever required or needed, put that data in. That makes your answer seem suddenly more authentic. You will be given more marks. So as per the report by International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA as it is referred to, India could generate 50,000 to 325,000 tons of photovoltaic waste by 2030 and more than 4 million tons by 2050. That is the total amount of waste we are going to generate. And we still don't know what to do with the waste. Here, as the panels are close to their shelf life, that is their expiry period, what is done? Some portions of the frame are extracted and sold as scrap. Now, scrap, when you sell the scrap, will it be the formal sector or informal sector? Always the informal sector. And junctions and cables are recycled as per the e-waste guidelines, that is electronic waste guidelines. Glass laminate is partly recycled. Silicon and silver are extracted by heating and melting. Overall, of all the waste that is generated, only 20% is recovered. 80% of the waste is not even recovered or recycled. Think about the problem that we have. Now, here also, what do you think will be the efficiency? If all of them is handled in informal sector, the efficiency of waste extraction, will it be high or will it be low? What do you think? Very good. It will be very, very low. Efficiency of waste extraction is very low. What is efficiency of waste extraction? That, let's say I give you 100 units of waste. Out of those 100 units, how much you are able to extract? So efficiency of waste extraction is extraordinarily low because informal sector dominates. So those are the challenges why India is unable to deal with this problem. If you take a look at it, informal handling of the waste, that means efficiency of waste extraction is very low. Okay, that means significant amount of waste is not even taken out. You don't have a market. This is a very major problem. Now, when I say lack of a market, please don't start saying that I have a market in my city. What are you saying? When you go to Delhi, you have the Connaught Place, so many markets in the country. India is a country of markets. It is not this market that we are talking about. When we say lack of a market, that means a market or a place where these recycled goods can be sold and you can generate revenue in a in a legal manner, right? Where you have a commodity exchange. Commodity exchange. Because majorly, when you have to recycle something, you don't get the bill for it. Regardless of whatever people will complain that look at it, now we have to file GST. All the scrap dealers, you find me a scrap dealer who deals with it in a legal manner. Everything is going on in a kind of a under the table money exchange, that I will give you these many tons of scrap, you give me that much amount of money. Nothing is legalized. That means that person who has bought the scrap, what that person will do to that scrap, you also don't know. So if you have a kind of a formalized market, even though you will have to eventually pay some tax on it, but the extraction process will be much more streamlined in that. Lack of understanding of technology, the awareness about the technology, that is very significant. We don't know how to extract and use selenium. We don't know what are the various different products as alternatives which can be developed. And that is because primarily there is a significant lack of research and development on newer technology in case of solar panels. Because what has happened in the case of solar panels, which is now happening in the case of electric vehicle segment as well, already so much research has been done by countries such as China. They have gained such a huge advantage that here the people, they don't find an incentive to invest in research and develop a product. Always while inculcating suggestions, if I ask you the suggestion to the last two problems, I'm sure 100 out of 100 will tell you, why don't we promote the research in our own land? Who will promote the research? You will say the government. But who will the government employ, and who will the government provide that kind of a research, and where will the government get that money from? Right? So obviously, in every part of the world, it is the private sector who carries or invests in research in every part of the world. Now, private sector here, they find it much more incentivizing to import the products directly from China rather than investing in research and development. They will carry out research for 2 to 3 years. By that point of time, China will come out with newer updates, and that research will not be helpful anymore. So we are already so lagging behind in terms of solar tech. That is where you have a problem of understanding of that technology, and that manifests itself when we try to harvest it. So that is an issue. Okay. So that is basically the challenge. What is it that India is doing? So the e-waste rules have been modified and amended in 2022. Now, as per the amended e-waste rules, the solar modules, the panels and cells, they have been added in the e-waste category, and e-waste rules provide for recognition and registration, skill development, monitoring and ensuring safety and health of workers involved in dismantling and recycling of e-waste. This talks about a slightly better conditions for dealing with the workers as well. And all the electronic and electrical equipment manufacturers, this triple E that you see, this is basically electronic and electrical equipment. All the manufacturers in general, they have been set a target as per EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. So the concept of EPR says that, let's say I have produced, you have purchased a solar panel. Now you have purchased a solar panel. Obviously, you cannot be a recycler of e-waste, because I have produced that item. the onus or the responsibility lies on me, that whether that waste is collected, if yes, how is that to be treated. So that is where the electronic and electrical equipment in general, that has to be handled, and that is where the government, as per the new rules, has set up a kind of a target that 60% of whatever you have manufactured needs to be collected back and then treated by the year 24-25, then 70%. So your target will be upgraded. So this paves the way for extended producer responsibility. Extended producer responsibility. That is EPR, where the producer is responsible for dealing with the waste which is generated. So the responsibility and the onus is put on the producer. Okay? Difference between electronic and electrical. The difference, my dear friend, is very basic. See, electrical items or electrical devices, when you use the term electrical in general, that refers to higher voltage, higher current application. Electronic items and devices, they operate, you will find, in millivolts, milliamperes, and so on. Electrical items, they will always operate in the case of volts, kilovolts, amperes, and so on. So that is the basic criteria of difference. Now, obviously, the devices which are known or which are specialized to handle millivolts, microvolts, milliamperes, etc., those devices will also be different. And the devices which are used to handle those kilovolts, etc., there you will find the usage of mica, silicon, etc. So the devices are also different. That is the basic difference. Okay. Now, look at the kind of question. Okay, before that, a summarization of the topic that we have covered. So in this topic, we have covered what is the problem of solar waste that we have, why it is becoming a problem, what are the challenges that India faces, what is it that India has tried, how is it that India has tried to solve it by the EPR rules or the change in the e-waste management rules. You have to understand the challenges. If you are aware of the challenges, naturally you will be thinking of the solution as well. But if you are not aware of the challenges that country faces, no question of knowing about the solution. In that case, everybody will have the same solution. You catch hold of any individual walking on the road, you ask him the solution of any problem, that India is suffering from heat wave, what is the solution? They will tell you the government should take care of it. When you ask them there is a lot of waste, what is the solution? The government should take care of it. When you ask them there is this problem, what is the solution? Government. So that is where you will be able to provide a kind of a layman kind of a solution. Whatever is the problem, government, but that is not the solution. Now you have to start thinking in a much more matured manner. So an increased reliance on solar energy to meet climate goals can lead to a problem of waste in the long run. Waste generated. Discuss the above statement in the context of solar waste issue being faced in India. So here in the introduction, you have to write about what is solar waste. Shakib, junction is where two things meet. So in any panel, you will have many junctions where multiple different cells, they will meet. That is where cables are also used. Junction in general, you would have seen even in the case of railway stations, many of them are mentioned as junction. Junction is where two places or two things, they meet. That is the junction. Okay. So that is what you write in introduction. In the body portion, you talk about the data or the type or the amount of problem that we have. So the total waste generated. Okay, the problem and challenges. Relevant government schemes. Because if the wording is, let's say, for 250 words, you can write about solution as well. Always mention the government scheme. Always makes your answer seem well-rounded. and then conclusion that India, being a pioneer for International Solar Alliance and other movements, India seeks to have a greater amount of solar power push, not only in the region but across the world. In that situation, India needs to handle its waste in a much more responsible manner, not only for its own sake, but also as an example setter, being the leader for climate change impacts across the world. So that is how you can polish it. And conclusion is the one which provides a long-term impression in the mindset of the evaluator. So ensure that the conclusion is well pointed out. Okay. Now a few questions I will take. Kirubagar, a lot of solar panels are purchased from our best friend China. Outflow of dollar economic impact will be there. Yes, but not in the case of waste generation. In our solar energy, Abhishek, we require lithium and plastic and solar panels, which are not only expensive, but also it is repairing is not that easy. That is also true. Since we export most of the solar panels from China, Gokul, how could we apply it? So in that case, the importers, they are also subjected to EPR. Not only manufacturers, importers are also subjected to EPR. Chinese materials, they do not last long in the long run. How India faced this problem? So see, think about it, that if even if I take in or assume your predicament that Chinese or postulation that Chinese products, they don't last long, that further exaggerates the problem in the sense that you will have greater amount of waste generated, and you cannot send that waste back to China, can you? So the importer here has to be made responsible for the waste generated. Should we write headings as introduction, body, and conclusion? Absolutely not. Abhishek, that is true. I have already answered your question. While that is true, but you have to understand that majority of the solar panels nowadays, which is being used in India, that is on crystalline silicon technology. And that has got a glass panel associated with it. Plastic is not being used. Okay? Right. Now, can't we understand the recycling mechanism of some developed? So it is about implementation. The problem is more about implementation and execution. Now we come to India to estimate TB burden using its own system, where India has become the first country in the world to develop its own system for monitoring of the TB. Now, why is it that India has come up with a system? That is because earlier this monitoring was done by WHO across the world. And the Ministry of Health, that had been carrying out its own studies as well. And where the ministry came up with the data, which whereby it found out that WHO had overestimated the TB burden of India. That is when India developed its own monitoring system. And this was basically announced, and this is something which is being worked upon and announced on World TB Day. So, on the World TB Day, observed on 24th of March, India held the One World TB Summit at Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh. India, overall, this is something you should be aware of, both for your prelims as well as for your mains as well as for your interview. India has got the highest burden of TB cases across the world overall. And India accounts for 28% of all TB cases across the world, according to Global TB Report 2022. There were 21.3 lakh cases detected in 2021 as compared to 18 lakh cases in 2020. Now, only 18 lakh cases in 2020 jumped to 21 lakh cases in 2021. What do you think might be the reason? Why is it that there is significant amount of gap in the number of cases only in 1 year? What do you think? Think about it. Very good. Beautiful. Because during the time of COVID pandemic, the aspect of detection of these COVID cases, of these TB cases, that was not happening. The tracing and monitoring of TB during the COVID pandemic, that was a problem, that was an issue. That is why reporting was less. Reporting was less, was lesser. during the pandemic. Very good. Okay. Now, the disease in itself, TB. Now, TB is a kind of a disease which influences your respiratory organs, but it can impact your other organs as well. So, if a question is framed that TB only impacts the respiratory organs, it will be an incorrect statement. It can impact the other organs as well. So, TB is caused by a bacterium referred to as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and that belongs to the Mycobacteria category, consisting of about 200 members in that entire species, the genetic variety of that bacterium species. In humans, TB most commonly impacts the lungs, but it can also affect the other organs, extrapulmonary TB that you have. Transmission is very easy, right? TB is spread from person to person through air. And in a country like India, where, believe it or not, we have people almost anywhere and everywhere, and not only people, but a lot of people anywhere and everywhere, when you have an air-to-air transmission, it is very easily transmitted. Every day in your day-to-day life, you would also have coughed in a kind of unstoppable manner, where it would appear that your lungs will fall out, and the other person would be worried that what are the diseases that are going to be spread. It was during the COVID time that people had inculcated that behavior of wearing masks, but look at the anger that people had while they were wearing masks, as if they were doing some kind of a duty to the nation itself, that I am wearing mask, you should pay me money for that. That kind of an attitude was there. So in such a scenario, when you have any coughing individual or any individual who suffers from TB, invariably they will cough a lot. And that is where it can spread, right? It is not only just by air, it can also be by touching the surfaces, right? So it is very easily spread. Many of the times, people are not even aware that they suffer from TB. And even when they become aware, there is a lot of social stigma associated with that. In the urban landscape, people, they are not aware about, let's say, who their neighbors are. So let alone the fact that if the neighbors are suffering from TB, they don't care. But in the rural landscape, still 65% of the population of India lives in rural landscape. This is considered to be a social stigma of the highest order, where people suffering from TB, leprosy, etc., they are, in some certain cases, they are pushed out of the village limits itself. That is where the stigma brings in the kind of condition or a temptation that, let's say I'm suffering from a disease, I will not say, tell it to anyone. Otherwise, I can be put in isolation. So that is where the problem exaggerates itself. It spreads very quickly. It is still said that despite all the reporting which has increased, now we have started to detect TB at a significantly greater rate. But still, we have many different cases which are not yet detected. So that is the major problem. Now, although elimination of TB has been a sustainable goal, and that goal setting is set to be achieved by 2030, India, in its own guideline framework, in 2018 itself, India had declared a kind of an intention, 2017-18 itself, that we will get rid of TB by the year 2025. So India has set the target of 2025, right? Now, National Strategic Plan for the 8 years 17 to 25 set the target of India reporting no more than 44 new TB cases or 65 total cases per lakh population by 2025. So warding off TB does not mean zero cases. 44 cases in 1 lakh. That is also very minimal. It also aims to reduce the mortality number of people who die due to TB at 3 people per lakh population. Earlier, basically, the mortality in 2020 stood at 37 per lakh. As per this target, we are still lagging behind about what we needed to achieve by the year 2021 and 2022. We are still lagging behind in that. But nonetheless, that is where India has become, or India has developed, a kind of its own modeling system. It has become the first country in the world which, by mathematical statistics and its analysis, is detecting, monitoring, and also providing the treatment for the TB cases and the TB victims as well. So it has become the first country in the world to estimate the TB burden in the country and launch its own mathematical system to estimate the disease burden. We don't have an accurate modeling system till now. Now, it has opted to stay away from the model given by WHO. Why? Because of difference in data figures reported. Because the Ministry of Health that has alleged that WHO is overestimating the TB burden. Now, this model that India has built, that is based on, it is a kind of a simulator. So the natural history of the disease, which are the sections which are impacted by it, individual status, what is the exact number of data that we have that these many people are suffering from it, healthcare seeking missed or correct diagnosis which have been taken, treatment coverage, including cure and also the outcome of that treatment in that case, in certain cases where the people are not able to survive. So based on all these characteristics, we will get to know the exact spread of the disease. Please understand, even during the time of COVID, when is it that we managed to have some control on COVID? When people started reporting it. As long as people were afraid to say to anyone that they were suffering from COVID, the problem was almost insurmountable. The period when people started reporting more, that is when vaccinations were also made available, and we had some kind of a control which was brought in. So what are the steps taken by the government? You have the development of a monitoring portal, that is the Nikshay portal. Now, this Nikshay portal is a TB control program to monitor and track services and status related to screening, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up of TB cases, right? Alerts to TB patient regarding medication, because the medication that is provided, that is a 6-month course, and that 6-month course has also to be repeated in the period of 3 years. So many of the patients, what they do is, in general, when you also fall sick, the doctor will give you a host of medicines. Now, after the second dose, you start feeling better. You don't take the rest of the medicines. That is when the disease relapses. So that is why majority of the patients, they don't take follow-up medicines which are required. That is when they get impacted on the long run. And we need to monitor those. For that, you have the Nikshay portal. Now, the government has also launched the community engagement program through Nikshay Mitras, where the Nikshay Mitras, they are encouraged to adopt one of the patient in terms of not becoming the parent of that patient, but being able to provide the nutrition or the nutrient enriched food. Because when you suffer from TB, your internal functionings, they weaken to such an extent that your body does not respond to many various different intakes that you take in. That is where you need to provide nutrition to the body so that your body is able to recover fully. So that is where the Nikshay Mitras, they provide monthly nutritional support to the TB patient. Because please understand, many of these TB patients, they live in an isolated state and an isolated area where the community is not ready to help, because the community is afraid that they also might get impacted by it. That is where, so far, you have 10 lakh TB patients which have been adopted by 71,000 Nikshay Mitras, and that is a significant step in the right direction. Now, government has also implemented a kind of a universal drug susceptibility test. What is this? Basically, you also have to be aware, I'm sure most of you would be aware of that in India, we also suffer from a significant amount of drug resistance. Since our very childhood days, you would find that in all of your households, in all of your family, you will have one or the other member who will keep a whole box of all kinds of medicines. I'm sure you would have one or the other member in the family. All types of antibiotics, anti-inflammants, everything. Few of the tablets and pills are such that you will find in every household. Now, regardless of whether you are basically facing a pain in your leg, an ache in your stomach, or a headache, they will have a prescription for all of them. They are not doctors. They don't know anything about medicines, but it is their combined accumulative knowledge, due to which we are in a habit of popping up antibiotics at a very frequent rate. All of us. We suffer from, let's say, a common flu. We will take in the highest order of antibiotics because we believe that let's finish this disease at day one. Let's not enter day two. But what happens over a period of time is the body starts becoming resistant to drugs or the resistant to medicines. That is why in India, majority of the patients, they suffer from drug resistant TB. That is the prevalent problem. And how is it that we find out? That after 3 months, we come across a scenario where after 3 months of medication, the patient shows zero improvement. The condition even worsens. That is when a person is tested for drug resistance or drug susceptibility. And then you put in several severe kind of antibiotics in order to suppress that TB case. By that time, already in certain cases, it has become too late. So that is why now, in the initial stage itself, drug susceptibility test is also carried out in order to monitor the drug resistant cases. So here, antibiotic susceptibility of the mycobacterium is determined for all the newly diagnosed cases. Increased testing based on the innovations and newer inventions that we have come across during the time of COVID pandemic, you have increased testing and increased testing centers which have been spread across all the various different districts across the country. So all districts of the country, they have molecular diagnostic machines which are made available. Now at the One World Summit, India declared its lofty goals to eliminate TB by 2025. Now here, a training module was launched in order to train whom? In order to train the health workers so that they know what to do if someone is suffering from TB. Now, a TB-free Panchayat initiative was launched in order to give a support of or over 2.5 lakh gram panchayats. They will be leveraged, they will be or their help will be sought to raise awareness of TB so that the social stigma is removed. When you remove social stigma, reporting will increase. Then preventive therapy has been introduced and family centered care model was also announced to ensure the welfare of the families in case they are suffering from TB. Now, what are the challenges that we face? Easy spread, very difficult to detect. Let's say you are coughing normally. Who will say that I'm suffering from TB? Right? Unless and until you have an exam tomorrow, you will never make such kind of an excuses. You will think that it will pass. You will never get yourself tested. So that is where hard to detect, very difficult to monitor if I'm taking the medicines or not, and how many people I'm spreading it, very difficult to detect, right? Social stigma means very few people actually report it. Lack of research. Generally, you will find that the drugs that we have, the medicines that we have, they have to be taken for 6 months over 2 years, depending upon the susceptibility or the resistance to mycobacterium. Now, long duration of treatment, whenever is there, means people do not follow that treatment. That is why you need newer research, newer drugs to come into the spectrum to help the people out. Okay, so here what have we discussed? The problem of TB. What is TB? What is it that India faces? Why is it that India faces such a challenge? What is it that India is doing through Nikshay portals and increased testing, etc.? And what is it that the country is planning to do with the help of the Gram Panchayats, the family program, Nikshay Mitras, and so on? So that is basically the entire coverage relevant for your mains exam. So discuss the steps which needs to be taken in order to address the burden of TB cases in India while analyzing the challenges in the path. So here, the corrective steps as well as the challenges, both have to be addressed in the body of the answer. Okay? Now, after this, we come to the Great Nicobar Island project. It is a 72,000 crore project for development of the region of Great Nicobar that has been put on stay by an order of National Green Tribunal, the Chennai bench of National Green Tribunal. So a special bench of NGT has temporarily put on hold the Union government 72,000 crore mega project for the holistic development of Great Nicobar Islands. Great Nicobar Islands, southernmost point of India in the Andaman Nicobar Island region. Now, identifying certain deficiencies in the environmental clearances granted to the project, that is why it was halted. Now, here, when we talk about the Great Nicobar project, that seeks to develop multiple different aspects of infrastructure. For example, you have at the region of Galathea Bay, I hope you are aware of Galathea Bay because it is a very significant protected area, forested region, heavily forested region, naturally undisturbed, pristine forests are present. So in that region of Galathea Bay, the project basically seeks to develop a transshipment port. What is a transshipment port? Transshipment port is, let's say, here you have an exporting country. Okay. Here you have India. Let's say here you have Vietnam. Now goods are brought to the port in very large ships, very huge ships, container ships. And from those container ships, not all of them are required by India. So in smaller ships, those containers are loaded and then the goods are transported to India, Vietnam, etc. and the ship moves on. So this is a kind of a transshipment port. Transshipment. India is seeking to develop this kind of a port in the region of Virinium in Kerala. That is where also India has been suffering from a lot of drawbacks or a lot of stallation of that project. So that project is also not being implemented with full pace. And same is the case with this project as well. Now, a greenfield, that is a newly constructed dual-use defense civilian international airport, a power plant, a gas cum solar power plant, and a township to be built over 30 years or more than over more than 160 square kilometer of land, which 130 square kilometer is pristine forest land. So there has been a lot of protest going on for a long time over this construction, and the government had provided the environmental clearance, but many of these clearances, they have not taken into consideration about the coastal regulation zones which will be in place. And there has been hasty clearance provided for it. Now, why is it that the government is so significantly hell-bent on providing that or implementing and executing that Great Nicobar Island project? After all, here you cannot think about it that they will win many votes from the region of Great Nicobar. So that cannot be the reason. What is the reason? Why is it that GNI, Great Nicobar Island, is of such importance? Think about it, first of all, from the economic perspective. Now, in India, we don't have deep water ports. That means majority of the large ships which come in the region, majority of the large ships moving in the Indian Ocean, they take a break at Colombo. Then after that, while moving to the region of China, they come through here in the Malacca Strait, take a break around Singapore, and then further they move into China. Now, if you build a transshipment port in Great Nicobar Islands, here, rather than coming to this region and taking a break in Sri Lanka, they would come directly here, okay? And then they would take a break here and then move on to China and Singapore. Now, once a ship comes, takes a break, that provides economic opportunities of its own. So economic significance is huge. And that is when you develop a kind of a airfield as well, you will have a lot of tourists also coming into that region. So when we talk about economic incentives, this basically has got port and also airport. So airport means more tourism. And then the strategic importance. Strategic importance is much greater. significantly huge strategic importance, because look at the location of Great Nicobar Islands. Now here, this is very close to the Strait of Malacca. This is your Strait of Malacca, or the Malacca Strait. Now this is used by Chinese vessels, Chinese warships, etc. to come into the region of Indian Ocean. Now here you have a natural island which is present. That is the advantage that we have. Many countries don't have this advantage of islands. We have those natural islands which are placed only a few hundred kilometers in that channel. Now, if we have a developed defense infrastructure in that area, that means greater monitoring and an ability to counter the Chinese aggressive designs in the region. That is something which India did even during the time of the Doklam crisis, even during the time of the Galwan crisis. Indian Navy was very active in this area of Nicobar, and Indian Navy and the Coast Guards, they had an aggressive patrol in that area. And in order to make our intentions very clear, that if push comes to shove, we have the capacity to block the Malacca Strait here because of our location of Great Nicobar. And if that happens, all the Chinese trade, majority of the Chinese trade from Europe, that moves through Strait of Malacca. If we block the Chinese trade from the Strait of Malacca, that means a strangling of Chinese economy. And also, blocking this means the Chinese warships won't be able to come into Indian Ocean region, and vice versa. Those who are present in Indian Ocean region, they won't be able to go back to their home base. That will give India an overarching advantage over that area. But for that, we need the development of this region. That is where the government is turning out to be impatient in terms of construction. And in that aspect, it has managed to ignore many of the basic concerns. And that is where the criticism is also leveled on the government. So here, it is a significantly fragile area, very fragile area. It is a part of the Sundaland biodiversity hotspot. So think about it. Many different endemic species of plants, animals, which you don't find anywhere else in the world, they are to be found in the region of Great Nicobar. If we carry out relentless construction activities, imagine the amount of pollution that will be carried out. Constructed areas, they might look clean, but during the process of construction, a lot of pollution is carried out. So the devastation which will be created in that pristine environment, the corals can be damaged in the long run. So that is something which needs to be considered. Loss of habitat for biodiversity. These are the eco-sensitive areas which are pointed under CRZ 1A and 1B. So these are eco-sensitive zones. Now, these eco-sensitive zones, no construction is allowed generally. Now, obviously, there are certain projects which are an outlier, but here, these projects have been sought to be an outlier in this because they have been deemed to be of strategic and significant national importance. So that is why here you have the construction. Now, Galathea Bay, which is a nesting ground for many birds. In fact, in the region of Great Nicobar, you have the leatherback turtles. So, leatherback turtles. CRZ is Coastal Regulation Zone. Leatherback turtles, some of the largest turtle species that you will find across the world, they carry out mass nesting and mass laying of eggs in the region of Great Nicobar. Now, will that also happen when you have ships and all that port developed? Obviously not. So that is where you need to find an alternate site for this, right? So turtle nesting sites, dolphins, other species will be harmed. Hasty clearance has been provided, as has been pointed by the NGT as well. NGT has said that, look, I am not going to question why you have provided clearance. You have obviously provided clearance in a very hasty manner. But even there, you have discrepancies, and that is what we will not allow. That is why a stay has been imposed. There will be loss of trees and mangroves, and this is a biodiversity hotspot. Which biodiversity hotspot? This particular region has a Sundaland. biodiversity hotspot. In India, how many biodiversity hotspots are present? Let me see if we are aware of it or not. 34. 75 is the Ramsar sites that we have. In India, we have 4 biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity overall in world, we have only 36 biodiversity hotspots. So there is no question of having 53 is the tiger reserves, 33 is the elephant reserve. So whatever number was there in the mind, you guys have written that. Okay, don't worry. Biodiversity hotspots, we have only 4. Okay. So that is where it lies in the Sundaland. So what are the 4 biodiversity hotspots? We have the Himalayan biodiversity hotspot in the northern part. You have the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot in the northeastern states. You have the Western Ghats and Sri Lanka biodiversity hotspot. And you have the Sundaland biodiversity hotspot in the region of Great Nicobar. Okay. So it is not 53, 75, 728, whatever. Okay. So that is basically the criticism what is being faced. So what is the way forward? When you think about the way forward in this, it is very simple. We have to ensure that development is carried out, but not at the cost of damaging the environment, right? So proper detailed assessment needs to be carried out. If not Great Nicobar, maybe an island nearby. If not Galathea Bay, maybe an island nearby. And alternative arrangement for the biodiversity loss needs to be undertaken. Remember, India is a party to Convention to Biological Diversity. India cannot afford to have a situation where we don't care for biodiversity at all. So that does not look for good for a country which is seeking to place itself in a leadership role in these conventions. So that is why you need to have the consensus. You need to have the condition where each and everything needs to be transparently monitored, that why a clearance has to be provided in this case, if it has been provided, what are the outcomes, what are the various different implications, everything needs to be monitored carefully. Okay. Now, here, when we talk about the question which can be framed, explain the advantages that the Great Nicobar project can have for India, discuss the criticism faced and the way forward. All of it we have discussed. So in the introduction part, you will write what is Great Nicobar project. So that is how you write your introduction. What is the main question which is asked in the first part? Address that in introduction. Then in the body part, address all the other areas in chronological fashion as you can. Okay. Then we come to the portions which have appeared in Kurukshetra, and this is the March monthly issue of Kurukshetra. So it deals with the expenditure and budget aspect, right? So both the articles you will find they have a particular connotation towards the budget aspect. So boosting agriculture and rural development, that is a budgetary aspect. So when we talk about boosting agriculture and rural development, you have to understand that till today, we have, as per 2011 census, 65% of India that lives in rural areas. Okay. 65% of population lives in rural part of the country, and more than 70% of the workforce, that is the employable part. So obviously, for achieving a kind of a sustained development, we need to ensure the development of this population. We cannot have development of 10% and ensure that entire area has developed. So that is why, in order to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025, which is the target, and the third largest economy in the world by 2027, which the government has set a target of, it is important to focus on the development of rural areas. That is the basic requirement. Now, why is it that rural development is very important? There's a cyclical process associated with it. Other than the fact that large, humongous population, or the first basic reason is still majority of the population lives in rural areas. Majority lives in rural areas. Abhijit, why new population census is not coming? So, because of the COVID pandemic, it was delayed, and now obviously we are going to enter the election year. So, you can expect the new population data to come only after election. Now, what is a cyclical process? So, if you have rural development, let's say, rural development. Now, that rural development basically means what? You will have increased income in rural areas. When you have increased income in rural areas, means people will have more money to spend, right? If your income increases, you will buy more things like, let's say, refrigerator, a motorbike, air conditioner, cooking stove, anything you will buy more. So in general, demand increases. Demand increases overall. Now, when demand increases, people purchase more. So as a result of that, production increases. Production increases. When the production increases, let's say the factory which is producing, let's say, pressure cookers. Now, that factory earlier would sell 100 cookers. Now, because there has been significant greater demand, they are selling 300 cookers. So, it will employ more people, more employment. So, when you will have more employment, that means what? More people will have income. So, more demand. That will bring about the entire process to a circle, and that will bring about growth. So that is why one of the key areas that you have to address to achieve a sustained growth, a sustainable growth, is basically increased income in rural areas that will be achieved by rural development only. So it is a kind of a virtuous cycle which will develop. Then the government has basically announced various different initiatives. Now, these initiatives you will anyway study for your prelims. Ideally, when you are writing an answer for the mains examination, you should be able to recreate these initiatives, right? Or at least name the initiatives themselves. For example, Awas Yojana. Awas Yojana, basically to build around 3 crore houses by 2024. So almost 2 crore have been already constructed. So when you have a house, obviously you have a kind of a stability, a security associated. That brings about an associated form of development. So Awas Yojana, Gram Sadak Yojana will also mean that better connectivity in the villages. That means farmers are able to carry their goods in a better manner without facing significant amount of loss to various different areas. So you have the Gram Sadak Yojana. That will also bring economic opportunities. The traders, the shopkeepers, they will be able to move to and fro from the nearby cities at a much more frequent manner. They will be able to get newer goods in the village. So the village market in itself will start growing. Then you have rural livelihood mission. Now here, to create diversified and a kind of a gainful self-employment, self-help groups where people are encouraged, promoted to work on their local products, right? And that is where they are able to earn more. Then social assistance program, so sub schemes for the vulnerable section like elder population, widowed, unemployed, so that they are not dependent that some other relative will give me money, only then I will survive, otherwise I will starve. No, they have a kind of an income security as well. And you also have the Rurban Mission, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Rurban Mission, that is rural urban mission. This is basically with the mindset and an approach that the rural areas, people are migrating out of rural areas. But why they are migrating? To get facilities of job, etc., and better facilities of infrastructure. If we make the rural areas themselves developed as economically powerful or in economically generating areas, then people will not migrate. After all, we all talk about Mahatma Gandhi. What is it that Mahatma Gandhi envisioned in terms of economy of a free and an independent India? You would have studied in directive principles of state policy the Gandhian measures and the Gandhian principles as well. Mahatma Gandhi always aspired for the fact that villages, they should be self-sufficient. They should be self-sufficient economy or economic income generators. That is where each and every individual will find not only a meaningful income, they will never need to migrate anywhere or seek for income anywhere else, because Mahatma Gandhi was very much convinced that ever since the era of industrialization, where industries are concentrated in fewer areas, that is when poverty has become significantly larger in India. So that is where the Rurban Mission fits into the picture. Okay. Now, budgetary allocation overall, you would observe that for Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, that is where you have various infrastructures created in rural areas providing work to the people, to the local population as well. You have significantly budgetary allocation for that. You have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So these are your major budgetary allocators for the rural area as well. Anushka Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Rurban Mission is for creating the kind of infrastructure and developmental parameters in the rural areas which match the urban centers. This is in order to ensure that no forced migration from rural to urban areas take place, and the urban areas, rural areas, they start becoming self-sufficient. Okay. Pravalika, though these schemes are good to hear, but in reality, only few are reaping benefits. That is very, very apt. Now, steps taken for agriculture. The budgetary allocation has been increased. So, budgetary allocation, as was depicted during the budget session, that is something which the article has copy pasted. So, overall, you have a 17% per annum growth of the budget in the last decade. And the budget allocation for the Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmers Welfare, here also you will have in the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, this was the growth rate. In the department, you had a growth rate again of 18%. So that is where even for agricultural research, the budgetary allocation has been improved. Now, income security has been provided to the farmers by PM Kisan. Now, what is the purpose of the utility? To ensure that the farmers, they are incentivized to modernize the agriculture. They have some assured income. They are not falling in the laps of the money lenders. And because in the case when farmers are forced to go to the money lenders in the market, they are unable to service their loan. And that is again a vicious cycle where you have to borrow more and more and more. And in many of the cases, this leads to the sad eventuality of farm suicide as well, where a farmer is forced to commit a suicide because they are unable to pay a loan. That is why a certified or an assured income is provided by PM Kisan Yojana. Agriculture Accelerator Fund for various startups in the sector has been established. Overall, you have to understand that the agricultural sector needs significant amount of research development, a unified market, and it is important to promote economic activities through incentivization in the rural areas. You incentivize the various production centers to come up, primary industries to come up. Public expenditure should be prioritized. Socially and economically backward section have to be uplifted so that they are not marginalized, and you have full utilization of the labor force. A joint effort of the government, the self-help groups, and the private sector is required. You cannot have the growth delivered by only one sector. So the question, very simple: discuss the need for having robust and sustained rural development, explain the cyclical process, describe the steps initiated by the government, all the steps that we have mentioned. CRZ, Ritu, CRZ is coastal regulation zones. So coastal regulation zones, they classify the coastal areas into zone 1A, 1B, then zone 2, zone 3A, 3B, depending upon the population size, zone 4 and 4A. That is the area between the water bodies. So that is where in the coastline this zonation is done in order to limit the construction, in order to ensure sustainable construction which is carried out. Okay. Transshipment zone. Shweta, transshipment means that a bulk product is reaching a place, from there you are redistributing or sending it to some other places. That is transshipment. Okay. Now, after that, we come across the development of tourism sector. Now, tourism sector has got immense amount of benefit associated when it comes to getting the dividend or the income out of it. It is said that for every dollar earned from the tourists, it has got a cascading effect of $6 earned by the remaining of the community as well. So how is it so? Think about it, and it is a very normal process for which you don't need the help of any book, any text, or anyone like me to tell you about it. You can think about it organically and naturally. Let's say a tourist comes to visit your place. Now, in your place, when the tourist comes, they will need to stay somewhere. So the person who is operating the hotel, they will earn. Now the tourist will need to eat somewhere. So the place who is or the person who is serving food, they will get to earn. Now the tourist needs to travel from point A to point B. So the cab operators will earn. Now, when the tourist goes, now that is true for international as well as domestic tourists. So when that tourist then goes to a new place, they find out that certain things are very unique of that place, and they will want to buy those items. So the local artisans, the local craftsmen also earn. So from one tourist, so many people are able to earn. So that is why promoting tourism has got a significant benefit to the local economy. Look at the entire region of the Gulf or the Arabian Peninsula, where you have many of the cities such as Dubai, Abu Dhabi. While they have the oil money, but they are also benefiting from the tourism sector. Look at the entire economy of Maldives. It is virtually running on tourism, right? Take a look at Singapore. While it is a business hub and a business capital in the region, but lot of tourism money. Australia. So you have many examples of countries across the world where the prime income is through tourism. When we talk about the hill states in the country, what is the one of the prime sources of income is always tourism, right? So according to UNWTO, World Tourism Organization, tourists are people traveling for leisure and other purposes from usual place of residence to some other place for at least one night and not more than for 1 year. If you are living in a region for more than 1 year, you are no longer a tourist. You have liked that place and you have migrated to that place. Tourist generating regions are the regions where the tourist journey starts and ends. So these are generally high income regions as population has some income associated with it. In India, generally during the time of the COVID pandemic, as has been the case of the world, we suffered in terms of the tourism sector during the times of the pandemic. And here also, the income was impacted. 2022 saw the resurgence of the tourism sector with record tourism happening in the regions such as Jammu Kashmir. Even today, if you want to go visit Jammu Kashmir, you will find that there are so many tourists who have reached that area that you won't find the availability of hotels, etc. So that has been the scenario for the entirety of 2022. Now here, government has launched Dekho Apna Desh program in order to promote domestic tourism. So while we are attracting foreign tourists, these are the top 10 countries of the foreign tourists who come to India. But the domestic tourism is also a huge market. You have many people traveling in various different parts of the country. So that is also an easy income generation source which we cannot ignore. lot of local population will benefit in both in the short run as well as in the long run. So that is where the kind of Dekho Apna Desh program, etc. Now also the tourist circuits. We have 13 tourist circuits which are being developed. Ramayan circuit, Buddhism circuit, etc. Now all of that ensures a theme-bound tourism where people, when they come to a place, let's say someone who is very religious. Now someone who is very religious, let's say ardent follower of Buddhism. Now the Buddhism circuit will help them visit those places. So that is where it will promote a kind of a theme-oriented tourism. For example, Kerala tourism is an ideal case for that. Now, Kerala tourism, when it was um, basically in the initial stages, when it was initiated, you know who was the head of the Kerala tourism department who initiated that entire slogan, Kerala, God's own country, which has become a very famous tagline, which has brought in many tourists. It was Amitabh Kant, who then went on to acquire higher posts in the various different central governments, and who also then headed the Niti Aayog. So Amitabh Kant was the first individual who came up that the state should have its own motto. That is when we also start developing mottos like Incredible India, God's own country for Kerala. So you are developing ecotourism in Kerala. So that is a theme-bound tourism aspect. So in that way, you are in a way pulling significant amount of people towards you. So what is it that the government is doing? Other than these tourism circuits and the other programs, the budgetary infrastructure has been improved. Tourists, they also require significant amount of infrastructure in terms of highways, better connectivity by railways, airports, etc. So infrastructure investment has been increased. Highways, expressways, railways are being constructed at breadth or at breakneck speed in a way. Then rural tourism is also being promoted through the Vibrant Village program. The cruise tourism potential, which is now being explored, especially in the case of River Ganga, we have seen the cruise tourism. Budgetary allocation of significant amount has been done by Ministry of Culture as well to promote such certain tourism circuit. So, for example, Ramayan circuit. So here, what is a tourist circuit? A route on which at least 3 major tourist destinations, which are not in the same town, village, or city, and not separated by long distance as well. So you have, for example, the Ram circuit or the Ramayan circuit as it is referred to. So all the places in the mythology which are said to have been visited by Lord Ram, they are placed here. So this is mostly to attract the domestic market and also the market from South Asia, where the cult of Ramayan or the story of Ramayan is arduously and significantly followed, and Lord Ram is worshipped. So tourist circuits should have well-defined entry and exit point that gives you an entire thematic experience. Now, what are the challenges that tourism in our country faces? First of all, ease of mobility is lacking. In order to move from point A to point B, invariably you will have to take help of your private transport. The government transport will take you from point A to B, but if you have to reach there, you will have to move to something else. You have to come to the nearest airport or the nearest station, and then you have to travel. So you don't have a holistic connectivity. So that is the lack of ease of mobility. So lack of a holistic connectivity. Infrastructure is lacking in many areas. While it is being improved, but it is still lacking. Law and order is a major problem. Law and order. I'm not saying that law and order condition is bad, but even one stray incident which happens where the tourist is manhandled, where the tourist has got a bad experience, when that tourist will go back to their state, their district, or their country, they will talk about it. And that is where the word of mouth spreads. And that is where the country, the region, the state gets a lot of bad name. So that is where law and order problem has to be tackled very significantly straightforward. Then lack of formalization of tourism sector. That means you have a lot of middlemen operating. So you have signal lot of middlemen, which is the problem amongst majority of the developing nations. You will find that when you go to visit a place, you will have to deal with a lot of middlemen. So the middlemen, they will always charge you much more. And that is something which is off-putting for the tourists. So that is where lack of formalization is a significant drawback. So what will be the way forward? Provide end-to-end connectivity, holistic mobility network, right? Metro should lead to a bus stand should lead to a railway station, that should lead to an airport. So you should have a kind of a holistic mobility. Law and order should be tackled well. Then you should have formal sectors, inquiry places, and the government, maybe the government monitored or regulated transportation services as well. Infrastructure needs to be developed. Okay. So what is a tourist circuit? We have provided the definition for it. Describe the challenges in the way of improving tourism in India. There again, straightforward, you can talk about the challenge. You can bring in more challenges. So whatever you have experienced happening in your region, which is influencing or impacting tourism in an adverse manner, that is again something you can highlight. If it would have been a 250-worded answer required, in that case, you need to provide some suggestions as well, way forward as well. Okay. So law and order problem basically, Anushka, is about, let's say, any stray incident where a tourist is manhandled or some items or goods are stolen from the tourist, or let's say there is some other mishap which has happened. Now, in that case, obviously, that tourist is never going to come back, first of all. But by the word of mouth, when they go back to their own country, what they will say to the other people about your country, about your place, that is not going to be positive. So rather than them being the conduits or the channels to attract more people, that becomes a kind of a harbinger of the problem. So that is a major issue. Okay. So that is what we have been, or that is what completes the discussion for all the topics of the webinar. Any issues that you face, feel free to write to us by mail. You can write to us. We'll get back to your problems or the questions that you face. Challenging to infrastructure in terms of when we talk about the infra. When you don't have the very world-class quality airports or world-class railway stations, etc., obviously you won't be able to allow, or you won't be able to attract those elite category who is going to pay more, who is going to spend more. So that is why infrastructure needs to be upgraded. When we talk about Gokul, valuable suggestion for remembering various data pointers. Gokul, ideally, first of all, understand not all the data pointers need to be remembered. If you have decided that which data pointers, for example, doctors to population ratio, for example, the TB target that India has set, let's suppose you want to remember that. Ideally, I would say keep these data pointers to the minimum, maintain an A4 sheet paper, at max 2 to 3 pages or 3 to 4 pages at max. Write in bullet points these data pointers that need to be remembered. Name it as factoids. Repeat it on a weekly basis. Whatever you are reading, in the meanwhile, just glance through it, take a glance of it. Believe me, it will not happen in a day, but after 2 to 3 months, this is something which will become a second nature to you. So that is when you will be able to remember the important data pointers. Can we also include golden pass for tourists through digital initiative? We can do that, but we need the enabling infrastructure to support that as well. In this session related to prelims exam, some of the questions, Sahil, from this can be asked in prelims as well. For example, Galathea Bay, where that is. So all these few of the areas can be important for your prelims as well. So that is all from my side. So till we meet again, take care of yourself. I hope that this session has been helpful to you. So all the best, take care, goodbye, and have a good night. Thank you.